Welcome back to the Auburn Avenue Monthly Podcast, and this month we have Peter Leithart with us. Peter was here for the Dabney Center, and he gave a session on postmodernism, and that's what I really want to talk about, Peter. Thanks for being here.
Sure.
Appreciate it. But why don't you start off, since nobody really knows what postmodernism is, though they've probably heard the term. Why don't you give us just a simplified definition of what postmodernism is and what's good about it, what's bad about it, those kind of things.
Yeah. The categories that I've tried to use to explain postmodernism come from the book of Ecclesiastes. And I found it helpful to think of modernity and postmodernity in terms of Solomon's image of the world as vapor. He says that everything is vapor. He also says that every human achievement is a matter of shepherding wind, which we can't do. We can't control the wind. And modernity is a cultural, institutional, political structure that for the last several centuries has attempted to bring technical control to the world, bring political control in various means, try to reduce the world to intellectual system. And so modernity is an effort to shepherd wind. Postmodernity is a recognition that the modern project of controlling reality intellectually and technically has not been successful, that there are things that are left out of any human theory. Human knowledge is not as global and totalizing as modernists tend to think. And postmodernity is partly an effort to reckon with the failures and the incompletion of modernity.
Now, what are some of the things that are bad about this, and what are some of the things that you can kind of see are helpful in this?
Well, then on the first part, the things that are problematic about postmodernism, I think, come out particularly in what I've described in the lectures as pop postmodernism. There's serious thinkers that are associated with postmodernism, but then there's a lot of the ideas that get filtered down to the popular level and lose some of their moorings. And at that level, I think there's a lot of cultural problems that are associated with postmodernism that are evil effects of either of a social political situation or of postmodern ideas. One of these would be a kind of knee-jerk relativism that doesn't acknowledge any kind of ultimate absolute standards, doesn't acknowledge any kind of final truth, doesn't recognize that there's better and worse aesthetically, those kinds of things. So that kind of relativism is not something that postmodern theorists, the serious postmodern theorists, don't teach that, but that's the way it gets filtered down to the popular level. I think another thing that I think is particularly difficult to deal with and is part of a postmodern mood, I guess, is the pervasive irony, which is a corrosive influence in contemporary culture. And I'm thinking of particularly the way that we're conscious of the artificiality of what we're doing, the relativity of what we're doing, even the roles that we play personally. It's very difficult for people to see those as vocations. They adopt a particular persona temporarily and maintain a kind of distance from the persona that they're playing. I think that's associated with a lot of changes technologically and socially, but it's one of the corrosive evils that's associated with postmodernism. As far as the positive things, I think that a lot of my study of this has been dealing with writers who are identified as postmodernists like Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault. And there are some important themes in their writings that I think are valuable. A lot of what Derrida has written focuses on language and signs and challenging some of the basic assumptions of a lot of the Western tradition concerning signs. And I think the challenges are valid. I think that you have problems with the theory of signs going back as early as Plato and Aristotle and comes into Christian thinking largely through Augustine, and there are questionable assumptions about the nature of signs that Derrida is challenging. So I think there are things at that level that can be beneficial. Derrida is not a Christian thinker at all, and so his work has to be used carefully and judiciously. But I think there's still some theologically stimulating things in Derrida.
In regard, as far as the church profiting from them, how do you see the church profiting from this whole movement?
Yeah, I think that again, it's hard for me to make a global statement like how the church should profit. Sure. I can just talk more about what ways I profited from reading these guys. I think that as an example, maybe this would be something I could extend more. Foucault has done a lot of work on analysis of the operations of power at a local level. He says that one of the main problems with modern political thinking is that even after monarchies are pretty much figureheads, they're just gone politically, political thought still focuses attention on the problem of sovereignty. He says that we need to, the king has been beheaded in reality, we need to behead the king in theory, instead of looking at power just as something that functions from a center, Washington D.C. for example, or the capital. He wants to show that power is operating in all kinds of local. There's micro exercise of power in various kinds of institutions, even within interpersonal relations. Those are all bound up with issues of power. And he's very good. He's cynical. He's paranoid. He's very good at identifying the darker consequences and the ways that power is exercised at that kind of level. He's done a lot of studies. He's done studies of the development of medical clinics, the development of prison systems, and the shifts in educational, how schools are arranged or organized. And I think there's a lot of insight into the dynamics of how power works and those kinds of small scale institutions, which I think can be very insightful for just being aware of the temptations of power and abuse of power that's possible even in the church. I think there's insights like that maybe that can be drawn from some of these postmodern thinkers.
And what about from, you were talking about signs and the whole idea of signs. What about in regard to the sacraments? Anything there that would be helpful?
Well, one of the main things that Derrida is contesting is the notion that signs. He's challenging the notion that was widespread in the Western tradition that verbal signs, the priority of verbal signs to written signs, and the fact that verbal signs in Aristotle, for example, are seen as direct signs of thought, and then when you write something down, it becomes a secondary, another remove from thought. So a spoken word is a sign of a thought. A written word is a sign of a thought. And spoken words for that reason are seen to be preferable. Even more preferable would be to communicate without signs at all. There's a strong impetus in Greek thought toward an unmediated encounter with the real, with the ideas, and that does get into Western Christian thought with Augustine, as I said, where Augustine speaks some of the same language. He talks about the verbal sign as a sign of a mental event, a motion of the soul, and he talks about written signs as being secondary to that. What Derrida emphasizes is the importance of the physicality of the sign and the mediation of all of our knowledge and thought, which I think that's very biblical, that our God comes to us not through some kind of mind meld, but he comes to us through written signs, through spoken words. He comes to us through signs like water and bread and wine. So Derrida shows that communication is always bound up with those those media, which I think is an important corrective, not just in classical Greek thought, but to a lot of Christian thought.